Taking place after the events of Thomas Comes to Breakfast is the 19th episode of the second series, Daisy, based on the story of the same name from the Railway series book, The Branch Line Engines. This episode is our introduction to Daisy the Diesel railcar, who over the years has become one of the most iconic characters in the series. But how does her introduction episode hold up? Percy and Toby arrive at the station feeling worried for Thomas after he had been sent to be repaired following his recent accident. The Fat Controller waits for them in order to introduce Daisy the Diesel railcar, who will help run the branch line while Thomas is away. Percy asks if she will leave after Thomas returns, and the Fat Controller responds that it depends on her performance. Regardless, he expects Percy and Toby to welcome her and help her settle in. The two engines happily agree, so they start by taking Daisy to the engine shed to rest. Arriving at the engine shed, however, Daisy snobbishly tells Percy and Toby that she thinks the shed is dreadfully smelly, and states that anything smelly is bad for her swerves. This makes Percy and Toby cross, but the two carry on and take her to the carriage shed. Daisy prefers it, but asks what the rubbish is next to her. The rubbish she is referring to is Annie, Clabber and Henrietta, all of whom are greatly offended by this and refuse to stay where they're insulted. Percy and Toby are forced to take them out of the shed and stay up half of the night trying to soothe their hurt feelings. Percy and Toby end up feeling exhausted the next morning, while Daisy wakes up feeling full of energy as she goes to the station to take her first set of passengers. Arriving, she starts to show off to woo them. Her attitude, however, changes when she sees Toby coupling a milk tanker to her. Enraged, Daisy refuses to take it, and despite her driver's arguments, violently shudders, lurches backwards and blows a fuse. Everyone at the station argues with her, but to no avail. Daisy explains that her fitter ordered her to never take any trucks because she is highly sprung and pulling is bad for her swerves. No one at the station believes her excuse and start to wonder why the Fat Controller brought an engine with such an attitude to the island. With everyone late now, the crew is left with no choice but to leave the milk tanker behind and allow Daisy to enjoy her journey, taking only the passengers. As she runs, Daisy chuckles to herself at how well her story worked and secretly decides that she will do only the work that she wants to do.
Oh, you should meet my ex-wife! She does the same thing! You two would be perfect for each other!
The episode successfully introduces us to Daisy the Diesel railcar, who is known to consider herself highly sprung and right up to date. She can be hard to please, mostly indignant and highly opinionated. She is extremely authoritative, trustworthy and confident in herself, and can sometimes boast of her abilities in particular situations, unconcerned despite having never actually been in such a position before. She will sometimes presume she can show other engines a thing or two, despite knowing little on the matter, until she actually learns for herself. And she's based off of these famous railcar diesels that were introduced in Britain. It's quite funny because when you see diesel railcars on heritage railways, they normally consist of 2 or 3 coaches, whereas Daisy is the only one, which makes her unique. And even though Sir Ringo Starr doesn't exactly sound like a lady when he's doing her lines, I do admire how he's trying to give her an upper class accent, and how he delivers her lines, and a lot of the times it's just hilarious.
This is dreadfully smelly. I'm highly sprung, and anything smelly is bad for my swerves. Look at me, she purred to the passengers. I'm the latest diesel, highly sprung and right up to date. You won't want Thomas's bumpy old Annie and Clarabelle now. Do they expect me to pull that? Surely, said her driver, you can pull one van. I won't, said Daisy. Percy can do it. He loves messing about with trucks. I can't understand, said the shunter. Whatever made the Fat Controller send us such a feeble, spluttered Daisy. Let me!
I also really love how she doesn't get on well with any of the other engines, nor Annie, Clabber or Henrietta.
Whatever is that rubbish? The rubbish turned out to be Annie, Clarabelle and Henrietta, who were most offended. We won't stay here to be insulted, they fumed.
And Annie, Clabber and Henrietta usually get along with everyone on the island, so it's a nice change of pace to see them meet someone whom they will grow to dislike. And when you first watch this episode, you'd be forgiven for thinking that Daisy is going to be a bad diesel like Devious Diesel, but she's more somewhere in the middle. Someone who does want to please the passengers as well as the Fat Controller, but also has a bad attitude towards things like pulling trucks and sharing the shed with coaches, or sleeping in an engine shed, which she considers smelly. So she's sort of somewhere in the middle. Not as bad as Devious Diesel was, but she's no angel either. She's a balance of both. And Daisy's theme tune is just top notch from Mike O'Donnell and Junior Campbell. It just sounds like something you wouldn't normally hear in Thomas the Tank Engine. But it just suits the character down a treat. And it should be worth pointing out that even though they still say it's a milk van in the episode, like what it was in the book, what we see on screen is actually a milk wagon. Now it's kind of weird that they would make a milk wagon and then still call it a van. But I suppose they probably ran out of money to make an actual milk van, so they just had to use what they already had. But at the same time, it's kind of weird that they wouldn't change the dialogue. Talk about sticking super close to the book. But it's just a minor nitpick, and it doesn't come close to ruining this episode. And it's one of those episodes in the TV series where we get to focus mainly on one whole area. And that's the junction where Thomas meets up with the mainline engines before carrying on with his trains. Even the carriage shed and the engine shed take place in the exact same location. I mean, when you look at shots of the station in this episode and episodes that came before this, then you could see the carriage shed and the engine shed in the background and the sidings behind it. I just find it really cool that both sheds will be in the exact same area as this station is. And it's one of those few times, as I said, where we get to focus on one whole area for most of the episode. Because most other episodes you go to various areas. And this is one of the few that sticks to one area. And that's why Daisy is one of the best episodes in the TV series in my opinion. It might not have any runaways, chases or crash scenes, but it's a great way to introduce us to Daisy the Diesel railcar. It's another episode that I do recommend checking out if you haven't seen it for a while, especially if you're a fan of Daisy.